Hey guys, welcome to Karenology. You won't believe how far some people will go to cause trouble. Funny thing is, I almost laughed when I saw it. Not because it was funny, but because the mind does that sometimes. Throws up a chuckle when it doesn't know how else to keep you from snapping. My house, my lake cabin, the place I built with my own hands after Linda passed, was fenced off like a crime scene. Not just a little garden fence, no. I'm talking 10-foot high steel panels, bolted into the ground like a damn fortress. The kind of thing you'd see around a military depot. And there it was, wrapped all the way around my property, with a lock. A lock I didn't own. I pulled the truck over, gravel crackling under the tires. The sun was burning low over the tree line, casting long shadows across the lake. My place looked like a prisoner behind bars. The water, my water, glinted behind that cold steel like it was laughing at me. I climbed out, slow, heart pounding louder than it had in months. And there it was, hanging from the gate. A laminated notice with the Homeowner Association logo. Temporary property restriction due to soil instability assessment. My mouth went dry. I hadn't heard a word about this. No call, no letter, no inspection, nothing. And yet my land, my sanctuary, was now off limits. I rattled the lock. Solid. That gate wasn't budging. That's when I heard her voice. Well, back from your little trip, huh? Karen. Of course. She stood on her porch across the gravel lane, arms crossed, lips pursed like she just bit into something sour, and decided she liked it. Floral blouse, clipboard tucked under one arm, smug as ever. That woman was HOA president, queen, and self-appointed sheriff all rolled into one. You're trespassing now, Tom, she called out, her voice sweet like syrup but sharp like vinegar. You really shouldn't be on that driveway. It's part of the restricted zone. I took a breath, clenched my jaw. Restricted by who? She stepped closer, heels clicking like nails in a coffin lid. By the board. You missed the vote. Obviously. Emergency motion passed 3 days ago. You weren't around, so we had to make a judgment call. On my property. She smiled fake and wide. For the safety of the community. The rage boiled up so fast I thought my chest would split. I didn't yell. I didn't lunge. I just turned, walked back to the truck, and sat behind the wheel, gripping it like a life raft. My hands were trembling. The next morning, I tried to get answers. Called the HOA office. Voicemail. Sent emails. No reply. Tried to schedule a meeting. Denied. They told me they were reviewing environmental reports and that my property might be deemed unstable due to erosion near the lakefront. I asked for evidence. They said it was pending. That afternoon, I tried cutting the lock. Bolt cutters. Didn't work, industrial grade. Figures. As I was leaving, one of the neighborhood guards, a guy I'd never seen before, snapped a photo of my truck. Didn't say a word, just took the shot and walked away. It got worse. I started getting notices in my mailbox. Warnings, violations, threats of fines. All fabricated. Meanwhile, the rest of the neighborhood whispered. Some folks looked away when I passed. Others watched too closely. I wasn't just locked out of my cabin, I was being erased. 3 days in, I was sleeping in the truck. The motel in town was full for some fishing tournament. And to be honest, I didn't want to leave. It felt like abandoning the fight. Then, on the fourth night, I snapped. It was around 2 in the morning, dead quiet except for the frogs and the low hum of lake bugs. I walked up to the fence with a crowbar. I wasn't thinking straight, just driven by a storm that had been brewing in my gut for days. I wedged the bar into the gate, leaned all my weight into it. Metal groaned, hinges popped, and suddenly I was inside. My boots hit the soil like they were coming home from war. I made it 3 steps toward my porch before the floodlights kicked on. And then came the voice. "Stop right there." A flashlight beam cut across my chest. Another security guy, this one with a badge stitched onto his vest, was already on the phone. "I live here," I said, voice low. "Not according to this." He held up a document. Same HOA logo. Same bogus restriction. 5 minutes later, 2 cops arrived. Local guys. They looked tired. One of them, Officer Billings, I knew from town. He didn't meet my eye. They didn't arrest me, but they handed me a warning. Said if I entered again, charges could follow. Trespassing. On my own damn land. As I watched them leave, that was the moment. The breaking point. Not the fence. Not the lock. Not even Karen's smug little face. It was Billings, a man I used to drink coffee with at the diner, avoiding my eyes like I was some kind of criminal. That was when I realized this wasn't a mistake. This was war, and I was going to end it on my own terms. The morning after the warning, I sat in my truck with a cup of gas station coffee that tasted like scorched rubber and regrets. I didn't go home because I couldn't. I didn't go to town because I didn't want to answer questions. I just sat there, watching the fog lift off the lake like breath from a dying man. The silence was heavier than usual. The kind that settles in after a punch, not before it. Around 8, I walked the perimeter of the fence again, hands in my pockets like some old ghost haunting his own grave. The steel panels were flush, reinforced at the seams. Whoever installed this had experience. It wasn't some slapdash HOA handyman project. This was professional work? Expensive? Overkill? I made a mental note. Someone wanted this fence to last. A blue SUV rolled up the gravel path. Windows tinted. It stopped halfway up the incline and idled like it was sniffing the air. Then the window rolled down, and there she was again. "Karen, still squatting in your truck, Tom?" Her voice carried that smug sing-song tone, like a cat playing with a wounded bird. Just out for a stroll?" I nodded toward the fence. "Admiring your craftsmanship?" She smiled. Slow and oily. "You should have come to the meeting. We're only trying to protect the neighborhood. That slope by your porch? It's a hazard. Think of the children. No children live on this side of the lake." Her smile didn't falter. "You never know who might want to move in." Then she drove off. I stood there long after the engine disappeared behind the trees. My cabin had become a symbol of something bigger. I just didn't know what yet. That night, I parked at the edge of the woods and hiked in through the brush like a fugitive. The moon was high, and I moved slow, careful not to snap twigs underfoot. I just wanted to sit on my porch again, just for a few minutes. Smell the wood. Remember Linda. I made it to the fence and slipped between 2 panels I'd scouted earlier. Just wide enough for a man to squeeze through sideways. I reached the porch, sat, closed my eyes. Then I heard it. A camera shutter snapped my eyes open and caught a glint of movement near the tree line. Someone was watching. Not security this time. No uniform. Just a flash of denim and boots ducking behind a tree. I didn't chase. Just memorized the direction. Left of the boathouse, northwest path. Next morning, I drove into town. Not to the sheriff, not yet. I went to the diner. The one where everyone pretended not to talk while talking about everything. Place was half full. I took a stool at the counter. Cheryl, the waitress with the scar above her eyebrow and no time for nonsense, poured me a coffee without asking. "You look like hell," she said. "Feels like home," she snorted. "They still got you locked out. More than that. I think they're watching me." She didn't blink, just nodded toward the back booth. "That guy's been in twice this week. Doesn't eat, just watches. Black boots, army jacket." I turned, careful. Sure enough, same boots, same denim. Not HOA, not local, but definitely not just curious. I don't like being spied on, Cheryl. Then do something about it. I paid, left a tip, and walked out like nothing mattered. But inside, something clicked. Karen wasn't just targeting me with fence panels and bylaws. She was setting me up. For what, I didn't know yet. I needed answers. And the only person who might have them was a man I hadn't talked to in 5 years. Jack Peterson. Used to be my neighbor. Used to be my friend. Moved out after his wife left him. Sold his place to the Homeowner Association for a community nature path. But rumor was he still had friends on the board. I found him in a trailer on the edge of county line. Place looked like it hadn't seen a broom since Clinton was in office. Jack answered the door in a bathrobe, beer in hand, and eyes squinting like I was the IRS. "What the hell do you want?" I want to know what Karen's building." He leaned on the doorframe, smirked. "You finally pissed her off enough, huh? She put up a 10-foot fence around my house and hired people to follow me. You tell me." He scratched his chest, then motioned me inside. "Not here," he said. "Too many ears. We'll go for a drive." We drove in silence for 10 minutes. Out past the last gas station and into the hills. You didn't hear this from me," Jack said, eyes straight ahead. "But she's planning to rezone the entire lakeside. Turn it into a private resort. Your cabin? It's the last holdout." My grip tightened on the steering wheel. "She can't rezone private land." "She can if the board votes and they declare it unfit for residents. Then it's just paperwork. And you're the test case. If you go quietly, the others won't resist. And if I don't?" He looked at me. "Then you better start planning your next move fast, because they already have." I dropped him off, drove back in silence. The lake shimmered in the distance like nothing was wrong. But everything was wrong. I wasn't just fighting Karen. I was fighting the machine behind her, and it was only getting started. The next morning, I didn't wake up so much as I came to, like I'd been dragged out of sleep by a silent alarm buried somewhere in my spine. Sunlight hadn't broken over the ridge yet, but the sky had that pale indigo tint that tells you it's coming. I'd slept in the truck again. My back was a wreck. My head worse. But I was awake, and that meant I still had options. I needed leverage. Proof. Something that would put Karen and her little regime on edge. And I had a hunch where to start looking. There was a storage unit on the outskirts of town, near the highway. Half the place was empty. The other half rented by folks who either had too much junk or too many secrets. I used to keep my fishing gear there until I built the new shed. More importantly, the HOA kept old files there too. I only knew because I'd seen Jack haul boxes out of Unit 19 back when he was still on the board. I drove out just after 6, parked outside the chain link fence, and waited for the owner to show up. Earl. Big guy. Moved slow, but remembered everything. He ran the place like it was Fort Knox. Tom Harper, he grunted, flipping through a clipboard. Ain't seen you in a while? You looking to rent again? No. Just wondering if Unit 19's still in use. He squinted at me, lips twisting under his coffee-stained mustache. Belongs to the Homeowner Association. Paid up through the year. Still got the same lock? He nodded. Far as I know? Why? Because I think there's something in there they don't want anyone seeing. He looked at me for a long moment, then shrugged. I open it, you didn't ask me to. You get me? I nodded. 10 minutes later, I was standing inside the unit, flashlight beam cutting through decades of dust. Metal shelves sagged under the weight of box files, some marked as far back as 92. I skimmed until I found a set labeled Zoning Proposals, Lakefront East. Inside were blueprints, property evaluations, and bingo, a memo from Karen to a real estate developer. She was offering priority access to lakeside parcels, pending board vote on reclassification. My cabin, parcel 1117, was circled in red ink. I took photos of everything. Then I sat there a while, breathing in the smell of mildew and betrayal. Karen wasn't just pushing me out. She was laying the foundation for a profit scheme. Rezone the land, deem it unfit, pressure owners to sell, then flip it to private developers. My place was the last domino. When I stepped out, Earl was waiting. You didn't find anything, he said, not looking up. Nothing at all. He nodded, walked back into his office. We never spoke of it again. Back in town, I stopped by the print shop and made 3 sets of the photos. One for me, one for backup, and one for insurance. Then I drove to the only person who might be crazy enough to help, Milton Hargrove. Milton was a retired Marine who lived in a weather-worn Airstream trailer parked on the edge of the lake. Most folks thought he'd lost a few screws overseas, but I knew better. Milton didn't snap. He just got tired of pretending things made sense. He met me at the door with a thermos of coffee and a loaded question. You here for war or just reconnaissance? Little of both. He let me in. I spread the photos on his tiny kitchen table. Milton studied them like they were top-secret maps. They're cutting you out, he said. Same way they did me when they rerouted the fire lane. You still got those trail cameras you used to set up for coyotes? What's left of them? You thinking what I'm thinking? If I can't go through the front door, I'll climb through the back window. I need to know who's coming and going near that fence. He grinned, showing a row of crooked teeth. I'll set 'em up tonight. I'll even bait the trail with a little motion-activated light. Just enough to make 'em curious. That evening, while Milton rigged the cameras, I drove to Cheryl's diner again. I needed neutral ground, a place to think. The guy in the army jacket wasn't there, but Cheryl noticed. Your shadow's gone, she said, pouring coffee. Or he's just gotten better at hiding. She gave me a hard look. You really going to go through with this? I don't see another way. She leaned in. Then you better make it count, Tom. They won't stop unless you make 'em bleed. Not real blood, just enough to remind 'em you're still breathing." Her words echoed all the way back to the truck. I sat behind the wheel for a long time, watching the moon rise over the lake. Tomorrow, the cameras would be rolling. Tomorrow, I'd find out just how deep the rot ran. But tonight, I dreamed of Linda, of her laughter echoing off the porch, of her fingers brushing mine in the breeze. The kind of dream that leaves you aching when you wake. The kind that makes you fight harder, because some memories are worth protecting more than property. The fence wasn't the enemy. What stood behind it was, by sunrise, Milton had already texted me. Just one word: activity. I drove straight to his trailer, still chewing on a protein bar, and washing it down with gas station coffee. Milton met me outside, one hand shielding his eyes from the glare bouncing off the lake. He didn't say a word, just handed me the memory card. Inside, we plugged it into his battered laptop. The screen flickered, buzzed once, and then the footage loaded. Night vision. The usual static of bugs and swaying branches. Then movement. Subtle, but unmistakable. A figure emerged from the trees near the northwest path. The same one I'd seen, denim and boots, creep along. But this wasn't him. The guy was shorter, heavier, hoodie pulled tight over his face. He carried a small tool case and paused at the edge of the fence line, glancing around like a raccoon casing a trash bin. He crouched, reached into the grass, and started working on something. Cables, wires. 10 minutes later, he was gone. They're rigging surveillance," Milton muttered. "Your land's wired. Might be audio, might be motion sensors, or both. How long would it take to trace those lines?" Milton grinned, like I'd just offered him a second tour in Nam. "Give me 2 hours and a cold beer." We started at the breach I'd used, slipping through under cover of early morning haze. Milton moved like he was 20 years younger, hunched low, scanning the ground like a bloodhound. Within 20 minutes, he'd found a thin black cable running parallel to the fence, buried shallow. This isn't HOA budget grade," he said. "This is contractor grade. They paid good money for this." We followed the line for half a mile, until it disappeared into an unmarked service box, nestled behind a tool shed on HOA common land. Locked, of course. But Milton pulled out a tension wrench and a rake like he was opening a candy bar. Inside, a small server box blinking green, connected to a cellular uplink. They're not just watching you," he said. "They're broadcasting it. Could be to anyone. Board members, Karen's private cloud, hell, even a third-party firm." I stared at the box, anger curling tight in my gut. "Can we shut it down?" "We could, but then they'll know we found it." "Better idea? Feed it garbage. Let 'em watch what we want 'em to see." Back at the trailer, Milton laid out the plan. He had old footage of me fishing, chopping wood, drinking coffee. We'd loop it. Make it look like I was spending quiet, compliant days doing nothing provocative. Meanwhile, I'd be moving in the shadows. It was dirty. It was sneaky. And it was exactly the kind of war they'd started. By that afternoon, I felt something I hadn't felt in weeks. Control. I spent the next day planting decoys. Old boots on my porch, a flannel shirt draped over a chair. steam rising from a fake mug warmed by a heating pad. Milton's loop ran like clockwork, perfectly synced with their sensors. And while they watched that, I watched them. I set up shop on the far side of the lake, using binoculars and a long lens camera I borrowed from Cheryl's nephew. Turns out he used to shoot weddings, but now he was between gigs. I told him I was documenting rare birds. What I caught instead was Karen. Twice in one day, she brought 2 different men down to the lakefront. Real estate guys. From the looks of them, khakis, polos, fake interest plastered on their faces. She pointed, gestured at my cabin from behind the fence, walked them along the shore like she was giving a tour of a property that didn't belong to her. I snapped everything. But the most interesting moment came that evening. Karen met with a man I hadn't seen before. Slim, sharp suit, expensive shoes not meant for gravel. He handed her a folder. She didn't open it, just tucked it under her arm like it was already agreed upon. That folder, it wasn't a proposal, it was a contract. The stakes had just gone from petty zoning wars to full-blown acquisition. And I had less time than I thought. I sent the photos to Milton. His reply came back quick. We need to hit back. Loud. He wasn't wrong, but I wasn't ready to go public yet. Not without something undeniable. The kind of thing that couldn't be dismissed as paranoia or hearsay. That night, I sat in the cab of my truck, staring at the photos. My hand shook, not with fear, but something else. Resolve. I thought of Linda. Of all the evenings we sat on that porch, the wind off the water in her hair, her laughter echoing like wind chimes. She wouldn't have let this go, and neither would I. At exactly midnight, I packed a bag and left a note for Milton. Time to visit an old enemy, because there was one person left who knew how Karen operated from the inside. Her ex-husband. I hadn't seen Richard Harwood in over 15 years. And the last time I did, he was storming out of a town hall meeting, his shirt half untucked, face red as a stop sign, with Karen right behind him yelling about ungrateful men and their small ideas. That was before she became president of the Homeowner Association, before she discovered power fit her like a tailored dress. I found him living in a converted bus on the edge of an RV park, about 30 minutes south of the lake. The kind of place where no one asks questions and no one answers them. His hair was gone, his gut had filled out, and his eyes, once sharp and cutting, looked like they'd spent too many years staring at walls. He opened the door slow, staring at me like he was flipping through a foggy photo album in his head. Tom, yeah, been a long time. He stepped aside, motioned me in without a word. The inside of the bus smelled like cheap whiskey, coffee grounds, and burned toast. A guitar with a snapped string sat in the corner. A pile of books lay beside a stack of unpaid bills. We sat at the tiny booth table, neither of us speaking. I laid the photos down. Karen, the men, the folder, the fence. He stared at them a long time. She's doing it, he said finally. I always knew she would. What is she doing, Richard? He ran a hand over his scalp. Karen doesn't care about the neighborhood. Never did. The lakefront's her gold mine. Always was. She tried to get the board to approve a development deal while we were still married, but it got blocked. Not enough votes. So she spent the next decade stacking the deck. Stacking? She found ways to get rid of dissenters. Old board members suddenly left. Vacancies got filled by her friends, her church group, her cousin's husband. Now the votes are unanimous. I leaned forward. And my cabin? Archer. Yours is the keystone. Your land juts just enough into the lake that without it, the shoreline isn't contiguous. The resort can't get private dock rights unless your property is absorbed. I sat back. The fence wasn't about erosion. It wasn't about safety. It was about access. She'll say you're dangerous. Say you threatened someone. She did it to our old neighbor, Margaret, the sweet old lady with the hummingbird feeders. HOA banned her from hosting community events. Said she made board members feel unsafe. I rubbed my face. Why are you telling me this now? He looked up, eyes suddenly clear. Because I hate her more than I hate you. I'm glad to see I'm still worth second place. He almost smiled. You want to beat her? He asked. You're not going to do it by playing fair. You've got to think like she does. Twist the rules. Use the system she built against her. I'm not her. No. But you can borrow her teeth. Just long enough to bite. We talked another hour. Richard gave me a name. Daniel Price. Former land assessor. Quietly pushed out by the HOA 3 years ago. He knew where the skeletons were buried. Figuratively, I hoped. I drove straight to Price's last known address, a run-down ranch house on a dusty county road, mailbox hanging on by a nail. He answered the door with a beer in one hand and a wary look in both eyes. I told him who sent me, told him about the fence, the surveillance, the contract. I don't want trouble, he said. You're already in it, I said. Only difference is whether you're buried under it or standing on top when it falls. That got him. We sat in his cluttered kitchen while he rummaged through a file cabinet that looked like it had survived a tornado. Finally, he pulled out a folder labeled 117 Deviation. My parcel. There was a loophole, he said, back when the HOA restructured property designations. Your cabin was never properly recorded as residential. It's still technically listed as agricultural holdover. That's why Karen fenced it. She's going to claim it's an unregulated asset and use eminent domain once the board passes the reclassification. You're kidding me. She's trying to ghost your deed out of existence. I took the folder, heart hammering, in my chest. Can you testify to this? Only if I disappear right after. That can be arranged. That night, I returned to the lake. I parked down the road and walked the long way around. Stars scattered across the sky like broken glass. The moon low and yellow. My cabin stood silent behind the steel fence. A prisoner waiting for a sentence. I looked at the folder in my hand and realized something. This wasn't about land anymore. It was about erasure. They weren't just taking my cabin. They were trying to wipe me out like I'd never been there. Like Linda and I had never sat on that porch watching the fireflies. Like none of it mattered. Well, it mattered to me. And if Karen wanted a fight, she'd just earned one. But the next move wouldn't be mine. It would be hers, and I was going to be ready for it. I didn't sleep that night. Not a minute. Just sat in the cab of my truck, with the folder on my lap, turning each page over like it might start screaming. By sunrise, my eyes were dry and my pulse steady. I knew what had to be done. But first, I needed to know how fast the noose was tightening. Milton was already up when I knocked. He handed me black coffee in a chipped thermos and pulled up the latest trail cam footage without a word. Karen had returned to the property line the night before. This time, she wasn't alone. The suited man was back, briefcase in hand, and a third figure joined them. Uniform, county official. I didn't need audio to guess the conversation. She was greasing wheels. Ach, they're escalating, Milton muttered. Trying to fast-track the reclassification. You've got days, maybe less. I didn't respond. Just stared at the footage as the three of them stood there, plotting the erasure of my life like it was a business deal. That afternoon, I drove to a storage unit I hadn't opened in years. It held the remnants of my construction business. Tools, uniforms, documents, blueprints. But I wasn't here for nostalgia. I needed one specific thing. The official land survey I commissioned myself 15 years ago when I rebuilt the cabin. It took me 2 hours of digging through plastic bins, mouse-nibbled cardboard boxes, and rolled-up permits, but I found it. Stamped, signed, and notarized. It clearly identified the property as residential. Not temporary, not transitional. Residential. It was my bullet. But a bullet's no good unless you know where to aim it. That evening, I called Daniel Price. He answered on the second ring. I have what I need, I said. But I want Karen to make the next move. I want her to walk into it. You're playing with fire. She started the fire. I'm just fanning it. I spent the next day quiet, present. I made sure the surveillance cameras showed me on my porch, sipping coffee, reading a book. Nothing out of the ordinary. Just a man trying to enjoy his view. By sunset, it worked. Karen arrived again. This time with 2 HOA board members I'd never seen before. They walked the perimeter of the fence, pointed at my cabin, nodded at each other like realtors scoping a teardown. Then came the knock. I opened the truck door and stood up slow. Karen was smiling like she'd already won. Thomas, she said, her voice dipped in honey. We're here to serve you notice. She handed me a thick envelope. Motion to reclassify parcel 117. The board has voted. You have 72 hours to vacate while we conduct official inspections and environmental review. I looked her in the eye. You think this is over? She stepped closer, lowered her voice. It was over the moment you left town and gave us the opportunity. The rest is just cleanup. I didn't flinch. Then you won't mind if I tidy up on my end too. She didn't respond, just turned on her heel and strutted off with her entourage in tow. I waited until they were out of sight before opening the envelope. The paperwork was clean. Too clean. Everything filed, signed, and processed like it had been in the works for weeks. She was confident, arrogant. And that was the opening. I met with Milton after dark. Laid out the land survey, the photos, the memos, and Daniel Price's affidavit. He studied them like blueprints. You're not going to the county clerk? He asked. Not yet. First we bleed her confidence dry. He grinned. How? By doing something she'd never expect. The next morning, I drove into town and visited the lakefront post office. Maureen, the clerk, had been working there since before email was a thing. I handed her a padded envelope, addressed to Karen and marked, Urgent, internal HOA use only. Inside, a single page. A blurry black and white photo of the county server box Milton and I had accessed weeks ago. Taped to the photo was a post-it note that read, We're inside. No name, no threats, just implication. By noon, the entire HOA board was in chaos. Surveillance footage showed Karen pacing in her driveway, making call after call. Board members showed up at her place in suits. One of them brought a stack of folders. Another left shouting. Whatever fantasy of control she had was cracking. Then, just after sunset, a sheriff's cruiser pulled up to my fence. Not a deputy, the sheriff himself. He stepped out, adjusted his belt, and walked up to my truck. "Evening, Tom." "Sheriff?" We got an anonymous tip. Said someone's been tampering with HOA communications infrastructure. Normally, I'd ignore it, but the caller had details only someone on the inside would know. I didn't smile. "You think I'm the one playing games?" "His chort, I knee." He shook his head. "I think you've been playing chess while everyone else plays checkers. But I also think you're one step away from turning this into something uglier than you want." "I don't want ugly, I want truth." He sighed. "Then get ready. Because whatever you've stirred up, it's about to come crawling into the light." He tipped his hat and left. As his tail lights vanished, I knew it was time. Time to show them all exactly how far I was willing to go. But I'd only get one shot. And the first move had to be mine. I didn't wait for sunrise. At 4:15 a.m., I was already parked on the bluff that overlooked both my cabin and the HOA's so-called community center. A squat, beige building tucked behind the tree line, pretending it wasn't the nerve center of Karen's operation. It used to be a boathouse. Now, it was where they stored secrets. Milton met me 10 minutes later. He wore black from boots to ball cap, carrying a duffel bag that clinked when he set it down. "You're really going through with this?" he asked. Too late to stop now." He nodded, pulled out 2 compact trail cams, a spool of cable, and a camo tarp. "We're going to make them watch their own lie." We moved fast. By 5:30, we had cameras hidden near the building's back exit, and another inside the woods facing the parking lot. I used to help install security systems before the economy ate my company alive, so I knew how to avoid detection. By 6:00, the sun was rising, and we were gone. From Milton's trailer, we watched the live stream on his rigged monitor. And just like clockwork, Karen showed up before 7, not alone. She was with the suited man again, same guy from the folder handoff, and 2 others in polo shirts who looked like developers with too much hair gel and not enough conscience. They entered through the back. 20 minutes later, the polos left, and Karen stepped out alone, talking into her phone, pacing like a general under siege. I tapped the screen. "She's nervous." "Good," Milton said. "Now we finish it." At noon, I walked into the county recorder's office with a packet under my arm. It contained the notarized residential survey of my property, the old classification codes, a sworn affidavit from Daniel Price, time-stamped photos of the surveillance box, and, just for good measure, a copy of the zoning memo Karen sent to the developer with parcel R117 circled in red. The woman behind the desk read through the first few pages and looked up slowly. Is this what I think it is?" This is the truth." Chucky, do you want to file a formal motion of complaint?" "Not yet. I want it to sit there. Let them see it's been filed. Let them panic. And when they do something stupid, then I file the complaint." She blinked. "That's strategic." "No, that's war." Back at the lake, I waited. Made myself visible. Sat outside the truck. Drank water. Played an old blues record on a portable speaker. Let them think I was gloating, because in a way I was. By late afternoon, Karen arrived. Not in her SUV. She came on foot, wearing jeans and a windbreaker instead of her usual prim blouse. No entourage, no clipboard. Just her, walking slow, like she wasn't sure how she'd gotten this far. She stopped at the fence, fingers curling around the wire. "I know what you've done," she said. I stood. "Then you know I haven't even started." Her voice cracked just slightly. "Do you have any idea what this means for the neighborhood? For me? I know exactly what it means. That you gambled with people's homes. That you built a lie big enough to trap yourself inside it. Yeah, you think this makes you a hero? No. Heroes save people. I'm just a man who got tired of being erased." She stared at me a long time, then turned and walked away. That night, I met with Daniel Price behind the old train depot. We sat on the tailgate of my truck. He handed me a flash drive. "It's everything," he said. "Emails, draft plans, internal notes, stuff they never thought I kept. You sure you're ready for this?" I wasn't 3 years ago. But now, watching what they're doing to you, it's like watching it happen to me all over again. I took the drive, locked it in my glove compartment, and then I did something I didn't expect. I drove to Margaret's house, the hummingbird lady. She opened the door with suspicion in her eyes, but when she saw the envelope I held out, she softened. "What's this?" "Insurance," I said. "If something happens to me, if they try to move while I'm asleep, you deliver this to the county supervisor's office. Personally." She took it, nodded. "Still fighting the good fight, Tom, so—" She's trying. One fence at a time. When I got back to the lake, something felt different. Still, quiet. The kind of quiet before a storm breaks. At 11:47 p.m., the cameras caught movement. Karen, alone again, walking the perimeter. She paused near the breach I used to sneak in, looked around, then walked inside. She stood in front of the cabin like she was seeing it for the first time. Then she took out her phone and made a call. We couldn't hear it, but Milton zoomed in on her face. She was crying. I watched her from the shadows, my fingers tight around the camera's grip, the lens fixed on a woman unraveling. Karen stood there for nearly 5 minutes after the call ended, her back to the cabin, her shoulders shaking in the soft moonlight. Then, without warning, she walked up the porch steps and sat down. That porch hadn't held anyone but me and Linda for years. It was more than wood and nails. It was memory. It was sacred. And there she was, slumped on the edge like a trespasser who didn't know why she'd broken in. Milton's voice came through my earpiece, low and careful. "What now?" "Nothing," I said. "We wait." We watched her sit for another 20 minutes. Then she stood up and disappeared into the night. The next morning, I returned to the recorder's office. Not with a formal complaint, but with a request. Can I see who accessed the zoning registry this week?" The clerk typed, paused, frowned. "Karen Gilroy. Twice. And someone from the HOA's legal counsel. Print it out. I need timestamp proof." She hesitated. "Tom, are you sure you want to escalate this?" I'm not escalating," I said. "I'm ending it, That evening, I called a meeting. Not an official one. Just a few faces who'd once mattered and had since gone silent. Margaret, Cheryl, Jack, yes, even him, and Milton, of course. We met at the diner after closing. Cheryl locked the doors. I laid everything out. The memo, the surveillance, the falsified zoning classifications, Daniel's flash drive, and most importantly, the bluff I was about to call. She's cracked, I said. She knows the game's up. But if we push too hard, she'll dig in again. So we don't confront her, we bait her. Jack leaned forward, skeptical. How? By giving her a chance to save herself. That night, I wrote a letter. Handwritten, simple, brutal in its clarity. No threats, no accusations, just a proposition. Return the land to its proper classification. Remove the fence. Step down from the Homeowner Association. And walk away. In exchange, the evidence stays buried. I left it on her porch before dawn, tucked under a stone. By mid-morning, we saw movement. Karen's SUV was gone. The HOA center remained locked. But around 1 p.m., a public post appeared on the HOA message board. Karen announcing her resignation effective immediately, citing health and emotional fatigue. Then came the real shock. That afternoon, a work crew showed up. 2 men in overalls. A truck with no HOA markings. They started dismantling the fence. Piece by piece. No ceremony, no warning. Just steel falling to the dirt. I watched from the truck, jaw clenched, heart racing. They worked fast. Sunset had barely touched the trees when the last panel came down. My cabin stood free. Milton stepped beside me, arms crossed. You think that's it? No, I said. It's just the start. That night, I returned to the porch. The real one. My place. I sat in the same spot where Karen had crouched the night before. And for the first time in months, I exhaled without a weight on my chest. Then I saw it, taped to the front door. A small envelope. No name, no seal. Inside, keys. Not mine. A different set, with a note. I left something behind. Take care of it. I recognized her handwriting. Karen. I found the lock the next morning. A utility shed on the HOA's shared land. One I hadn't paid attention to before. Inside, boxes, paper records, printouts, emails, hard drives. Not just about me, about everyone. Decades of HOA manipulations. Fake violations. False citations. Property pushes. Quiet evictions. She left it all. I sat on the floor of that shed for over an hour, surrounded by the rot she'd tried to control, then bury, then escape. And for the first time, I pitied her. She hadn't just lost. She'd surrendered. But I wasn't done yet, because what I held wasn't just proof. It was freedom. Not just for me. For everyone she'd touched. I didn't rush. That was the first decision I made after opening those boxes. When you hold a weapon that powerful, truth, you don't swing it wildly. You wait, you study, and then you strike where it counts. For the next week, I spent my days cataloging everything Karen had left behind. I set up shop in my cabin, which felt like a living, breathing thing again now that the fence was gone. The floor still creaked in all the same places. The smell of cedar and old coffee lingered. Linda's wind chimes still whispered over the lake when the breeze rolled in. I kept the lights low and the blinds shut. Milton came by twice a day, bringing food and silence. We worked together like we were building a case against the devil himself. The evidence was damning. False HOA violations that conveniently aligned with property acquisitions. Resignation letters from board members who'd been pressured out. Meeting transcripts with redacted lines. until you held them up to the light and saw the originals underneath. Emails coordinating with developers to stage safety reports and erosion claims. Karen hadn't just broken rules. She'd built an empire on them, and now it was mine to dismantle. But I didn't want revenge. I wanted repair. I reached out to Daniel Price. Told him I was ready to move forward. Then to Margaret, Cheryl, even Jack. We met in the shed, what we now called the archive, and I laid out my plan. We weren't going to expose it all at once. We were going to bleed it out, bit by bit. Not to punish, to educate, to rebuild. We started small. A printed newsletter slipped under every door in the community. Unsigned, just facts, verified, simple. First topic, the false erosion assessments. The effect was immediate. At the next community event, a so-called HOA bonfire social, neighbors who hadn't spoken in years huddled in circles, passing copies of the letter like contraband. Nobody mentioned Karen, but everyone knew. Then came the second drop. A timeline of past HOA presidents and the property seizures that followed, with maps, receipts, quotes. The third letter exposed the manipulated vote on zoning reclassification. By the fourth week, the board held an emergency meeting. Not in the center. In the open, on the lake lawn. Folding chairs, people standing shoulder to shoulder. And that's when it happened. A motion was passed to dissolve the current board and call for community-led elections. I didn't run. I didn't speak. I watched, and when the votes were counted, Margaret was elected chair. Cheryl took treasurer. Jack, of all people, volunteered for operations. Milton refused an official role, but everyone knew who really kept the peace. The new board's first act? Declassify every document in the HOA archive. Make it public, online, open to all. The second? Issue an apology. I read it sitting on my porch. Linda's blanket over my legs. The wind off the lake carried voices. Real laughter, real conversation. My place was no longer a battleground. It was home again. 1 week later, I received a letter in the mail. No return address. Inside, just a photograph. Karen, sitting in a train station. A duffel bag at her feet. No makeup. No mask. Just a woman stripped bare. On the back, 3 words. Thank you anyway. I don't know what she meant. Maybe even she didn't. But it didn't matter, because I'd already won. Not through courts, not through violence, through persistence. Thousands. Through memory, through refusing to be erased. That's the thing about fences. They don't just keep people out. They keep you from seeing what's already yours. And once they fall, you remember who you were before they ever went up.